China's real estate sector is crumbling to the ground. The Ponzi scheme is up. Evergrande kick-started the country's financial crisis more than 2 years ago, and now it's reporting the biggest losses the world has ever seen. Colossal losses. China's real estate bubble popped in 2021 as a result of Evergrande's debt issues. Now that the financial statements are out, we finally know how bad the situation actually is. They had to publish them long before beginning a debt restructuring process. Guess what? Turns out in 2021 and 2022, Evergrande recorded net losses of $66 billion and $15 billion. To put it into perspective, Microsoft's whole 2022 earnings was $72 billion. Yet the combined losses of Evergrande at $81 billion were more than Microsoft's yearly profit. Evergrande's earnings also plummeted from $71 billion in 2020 to $32 billion in 2022. At the end of 2022, their liabilities came up at around $340 billion, including $85 billion in loans. Also, the developer is said to have about $2 billion in cash on hand. Even worse, their auditor was unable to express an opinion on the company's financial reports. Why? Because they didn't have access to the data. What in the world? Oh, and those are the numbers we're being told. You can imagine the reality is much worse than that. If everyone in the world lost about $10 each, it still wouldn't match Evergrande's numbers. That's how bad it is, folks. Now they need to persuade their creditors to agree to a restructure of its offshore debt. You see, in December 2021, the developer missed a payment on its offshore debt. Liabilities for the corporation reached $335 billion in 2022. That outweighed the $251 billion in assets. Financial troubles at one of China's biggest real estate companies will influence the country's economy, that's for sure. In fact, Evergrande got the title of being the most indebted developer in the world. In June 2021, the firm disclosed its first $300 billion in liabilities. 6 months later, it went into default. And what do you know? Since then, they've been trying in vain to restructure part of their debt. Now there are also talks of a restructuring plan. Plus, the corporation has been in talks with foreign investors about its debt load too. Let's see how that works out for them, if at all. Because of all these issues, Chief Executive Officer Xia Haijun and the Chief Finance Officer Pan Darong resigned a year ago. In their place, Siu Sean and Qian Cheng have taken over. Now, Evergrande isn't the only real estate company in hot water. Kaiser, another troubled Chinese developer, also went into default after failing to complete a $400 million bond payment. The issue is much bigger. Property crisis. The real estate sector accounts for a quarter of the country's economic development, so the company's trouble should be worrying everyone. The sudden death of Evergrande, one of the biggest real estate developers in China, is a metaphor for the country's property crisis. It poses a risk to their post-COVID economic recovery plans. Created in 1996, they borrowed billions of dollars to increase real estate holdings. They also diversified into new markets such as electric vehicles. But the nosedive was sudden and unforgiving. And even within China's indebted real estate market, Evergrande's liabilities were of a level that stood out. Beijing then put restrictions on how much debt developers could hold, which meant the company experienced liquidity problems as money started to get tight. For context, you need to know that China's property issues are the result of policy changes. Beijing implemented a 3 red lines policy in August 2020. It was to deflate a huge property bubble that had been building for years. The strategy was to reduce the economy's over-reliance on real estate, and also to kill the speculation that drove up housing costs beyond the means of many Chinese middle-class families. To borrow money from banks and other financial institutions, developers had to stick to tight criteria, including a 100% cap on net debt to equity. It turned out that several developers had been operating outside of the 3 red lines and had racked up huge debt. Well, because of the new regulations, the sector was unable to borrow, which caused a huge liquidity shortage. As Evergrande tried to save money, it started abandoning incomplete projects. Plus, they delayed payments to suppliers. Their issues soon extended to other developers, some of which experienced a cash crisis and so postponed vendor and construction payments. It was like a domino effect. New home prices fell because of the unpredictability, which increased the strain on leveraged developers. Last year, the housing crisis even sparked protests. Hundreds of thousands of people around the country refused to pay their mortgages. Now the developers are struggling to sell new homes. Even completed projects are standing completely empty. For instance, in Nanchang, the provincial capital of Jiangxi, about 1/5 of the homes remain unoccupied. A dying economy. As if all those troubles weren't enough, China is going through a horrible time, economically. Exports are down, unemployment is up, people are still angry about those lockdowns. The government, well, it's more of a dictatorship at this point. So, an already sluggish economic recovery is affected by China's collapsing property bubble. 6.3% of the Chinese economy went up year over year in the last 3 months, which was way less than expected. Their exports also fell like crazy, and the nation is already verging on deflation, possibly recession too. Oh, and China's youth unemployment rate reached a new high of 21.3%, the highest level ever. A quarter of the economy comes from real estate, which isn't growing either. The Statistics Bureau of China recorded a 2.2% annual drop in its index of housing prices last month. In fact, Goldman Sachs predicts that the sector will likely see persistent weakness for years. The government is trying to pump money into their economy, but only time will tell if that's going to work. Like, China extended its property industry support measures till the end of 2024. The steps include lowering borrowing rates and down payments, also ensuring that buyers get their completed homes. Should we be worried? Well, China's economic health was already hanging by a thread because of Beijing's strict zero-COVID policy. Citizens endured months upon months of strict lockdowns while things were a lot more relaxed all over the world. Just when they got out of that, things have been made worse by the country's real estate sector crashing. According to some estimates, real estate makes up 30% of GDP, which is twice as much as it does in the US. Some analysts think that the market has bottomed out. The sector's problems will last for some time. In fact, a situation worse than the 2008 financial crisis was predicted by S&P Global Ratings. Yup, at a 30% decline in real estate values this year. That didn't happen, but they're pretty close. Simply put, a huge part of the Chinese economy is currently in some financial trouble. Now, the good news is that the global economy is not at risk. At least not the kind of financial catastrophe brought on by the fall of Lehman Brothers in the United States. Well, since Chinese real estate developers don't have a lot of foreign debt, that's why. But a huge showdown might still have a great impact on global growth, all because of China's size, which is around 1/5 of global GDP. According to a 2019 analysis by the US Federal Reserve, an 8.5% drop in China's GDP would cause advanced economies to experience a 3.25% decline, and developing economies a roughly 6% decline. So yes, the bad news is that we can all expect some tremors. Analysts believe that China is headed for a long-winded decline, one that will slow down global growth in the upcoming years. After decades of rapid economic expansion, they'll be facing years of economic stagnation. It will feel like a recession to many Chinese citizens. Beijing has made it clear that supporting the real estate market is a crucial duty. Yes, despite their need to lessen the economy's reliance on the sector, officials from China's top decision-making body stated that the real estate market needs to be stabilized. They also emphasized that local governments should see to it that pre-sold properties are completed. In fact, Beijing is getting ready to loan out 200 billion yuan to incomplete housing projects. Also, they have implemented policies to stimulate the economy. That's including the announcement of 300 billion yuan in fresh loans through its state-run policy banks. Other policies include decreasing interest rates and implementing a stimulus package. China's market-stimulating measures could be limited because Beijing is expected to adhere to its 3 red lines. Oh, and their president's belief that houses are for living in, not for speculation. Crystal clear. Well, as of now, 30 real estate firms have failed to make payments on their international debt. If sales do not go up, more companies will follow. The problem is, as China experiences a demographic shift, demand for housing isn't increasing. The shift is because of slower population growth and urbanization. In China, real estate makes up over 70% of individual wealth. Property buyers sometimes make upfront payments for unfinished construction. These pre-sales account for 70% to 80% of all new home sales in China. Developers need that cash since they use it to then fund other projects. But a large number of young and middle-class Chinese are no longer investing in real estate. It's most likely because of a failing economy, job losses, salary cuts. Oh, and more recently, the worry that developers may not finish projects. It's all a horrible loop, you see. And hear this. China's real estate market is so dismal that some banks are taking extreme steps, like letting borrowers pay down their debts until they are 95 years old. 95! Yep, some banks in the cities of Nanning, Hangzhou, Ningbo, and Beijing have increased the age for mortgages to be between 80 and 95. So loans with maturities ranging from 10 to 25 years are now available to borrowers over the age of 70. The new age restrictions are not yet part of official national policy. They want to boost the nation's dying real estate market and keep China's growing population in mind. Doesn't look too hopeful, does it? Guess we'll have to wait to see what measures the government takes to bring the real estate sector back to life. But from the looks of it, it's been a long time coming. The crisis was looming for more than 2 years. And now that the bubbles burst, it's like China's real estate sector got hit by a tsunami. Let us know in the comments below what you think about China's real estate sector crashing, and make sure to subscribe for more. We'll see you in the next video.